So I had a really hard time writing the song for this month. My mind has really been crowded, just been busy, and it's been a busy month, and so I've spent very little time reading. I've spent very little time in prayer, and I can tell when I don't take that kind of time to rest that I get really restless. And when I get restless, I get really wrapped up in myself. And so when it came to writing, I was just writing stuff and everything sounded stupid to me. It all sounded just so dumb, and I was like, and that made me even more self-conscious, right? Actually, a friend online posted, I made a comment about this on Facebook, and this friend said, well, maybe you need to take a break. Maybe you need to do something nourishing. Maybe you need to read a book, or maybe you need to not work on anything for a while. And when I read that, I realized that I really already knew that she just pointed out something I hadn't been able to slow down enough to pay attention to that. So I picked up a book that some friends had sent me for Christmas, and it's called Art and the Beauty of God. And I got into, it's like the first chapter, and read this. You have sometimes said to yourself, if only I could write. But you were wrong. You ought to have said, if only I could think and feel. When you cannot express yourself, you can depend upon it, that you have nothing precise to express. But what incommodes you is not the vain desire to express yourself better, but the vain desire to think more clearly, to feel more deeply. But all apprehension of beauty involves a struggle to apprehend the truth, and all artistic creation involves the struggle to express it. And what I realized was that I hadn't taken the time to live deeply. It wasn't that I couldn't write, it was that I didn't have anything to write about because I hadn't taken the time to drink up anything deep. So that was very striking to me. So the next morning I was feeling, very frustrated and depleted. And so I decided to take the advice of another friend of mine who says, you should read New Testament books from start to finish to get the whole context. Read the entire epistle and read it out loud. And so I said, well, okay, I'll do that. So I picked John because it's just a few pages and I like John in general. And I read it out loud. And what struck me is that John is writing to this very depleted people. Somebody in their community was pulling the rug out from under their faith, and they had lost confidence in who Jesus is and in what Jesus had done for them, and therefore they didn't have a sense of safety in his love. They were restless, they were worried, they were tired, and they were afraid that this love that had been communicated to them in the gospel was really just a big lie after all. And so they weren't able to relax. So John is writing to nurse them back to health by giving them good food, right? Reminding them that Jesus really is God. He really did come in the flesh, and the death that he died on the cross really worked, and it really did prove that he loves us and that we are clean and we're free, so that you can relax in God's perfect love that casts out fear, right? So I read that and I came back to the writing desk and I wrote a bunch of stuff that sounded really stupid to me for half a day, and finally I stopped and I said, okay, all I really want is I want to believe. I want to believe what John said about Jesus, and I want to believe what John said to his friends. And all I really want to say to my friends is that same thing. Is that just to simply say, yes, life has very real grief and pain, but at the same time, what's as true, or maybe more true than that, is what Jesus has shown us about what love really is and how he really does love us. And John says he's writing his friends to give them confidence. He wants them to be able to rest when their hearts condemn them. Even if that condemnation has truth in it, he wants them to know that his love is greater than their hearts and greater than that condemnation. That his love pierces that condemnation and redeems it. So there are tears in everything, but it is so good to be reminded that we are loved, and that is true, that is ultimately true. But not just in some way that I made up what love means, so that love is really only sustained by my performance. I need something better than that. I need better news than that. And John gives that news. He says, no, Jesus' love didn't come from you. It came from heaven to you. And so that's been ultimately encouraging. And then the bridge of this song is just me saying thank you for listening. That you making room for this year for these songs. It's not really possible for me to tell you what that means to me and to say thank you enough. But I'm really grateful. It's been an amazing privilege for me to thank you for that. And I can be encouraged in the new year that Jesus' love is real.
Take it easy. You put so much pressure on yourself. Just come inside. There's no need to impress even me. I wanna say some brilliant thing, but I'm letting go. At least I'm trying to let go. And there are tears in everything, and I'm too tired for playing games. So I'll say it plain, without much poetry. It's so good to be loved. And I did not know what love was till Jesus. You lost your marriage, your mother died this year, your bruises linger, though the skin looks clear. You feel so lonely, like your whole life is in vain, and you're embarrassed. This wasn't part of the plan. But there are tears in everything, and I'm too tired for playing games. So I'll say it plain, without much poetry. It's so good to be loved. And I didn't know what love was could never tell you quite what it means for you to take the time for listening. And if there's one thing I could sing above all else, when I get free from the need to prove myself, it's that it's so good to be loved. There are tears, tears in everything, and I'm too tired for playing games. So I'll say it plain without much poetry. It's so good to be loved, and I did not know what love was till Jesus. So I'll say it plain without much poetry. It's so good to be loved, and I did not know